Picture this. You are sitting at the kitchen table in 2032 with your retirement budget open. Not a fancy spreadsheet, just retirement in real life. Groceries, the Medicare premium, the property tax notice, the car insurance bill, the utility bill, and prescriptions that seem to get more expensive every time you refill them. You planned around Social Security because that is how retirement planning usually works. You work for decades, you pay into the system, you check your Social Security estimate, and you use that number as part of the plan. Maybe your estimate said $2,500 a month. Maybe, as a couple, you expected $4,500 a month combined. That number may not have covered everything, but it covered enough that the retirement budget seemed workable. Then the headline hits, Social Security Insolvency by 2032. If you are retired, or anywhere close to it, that headline can make you wonder whether the income you were counting on will actually be there to cover the bills. So let's slow this down, because the headline is scary, but it is not the whole story. Social Security is not projected to disappear in 2032. The checks are not expected to go to zero. This is not the government shutting off the system and leaving retirees with nothing. What the projection says is more specific, less dramatic, and still very serious. The Retirement Trust Fund is projected to run out of reserves. If Congress does nothing, payroll taxes would still be coming in, but those taxes may only be enough to pay about 78% of scheduled benefits. Most of the news coverage turns that into a possible 22% benefit cut, and that is already painful. But there is another layer that matters more in real life. You do not live on percentages. You live on what the check can actually buy. For the simple stress test in this video, I'm using about 3.6% inflation. That is roughly the average annual inflation rate from 1975 through 2025, based on Consumer Price Index data. This is not an official Social Security formula. It is a household stress test. It is a way to ask what happens if a smaller check has to cover higher prices. So, if Social Security pays 78% of the expected benefit, your check is already smaller. And if everyday costs are about 3.6% higher than your budget assumed, that smaller check has to stretch across higher bills. In plain English, a 22% benefit shortfall can feel like roughly a 25% hit to what your check can actually cover. That is what I want to walk through, because this is where a news headline becomes a household budget problem. The word causing most of the confusion is insolvency. When you hear that, it is easy to think bankruptcy. And bankruptcy sounds like gone. So your mind jumps straight from Social Security insolvency to my check disappears. But Social Security does not work like a business that closes when the account gets low. Workers would still be paying payroll taxes. Those taxes would still help fund benefits. The problem is that the trust fund reserve, the backup pot of money that helps cover the gap, could be depleted. When that reserve runs out, there is still money coming in. Just not enough, under current projections, to pay every scheduled retirement benefit in full. Scheduled benefits are the number the formula says you are supposed to get. Payable benefits are what the system can actually send out with the money available. If those two numbers are not the same, the difference does not stay in Washington. It lands in your monthly budget. You may be planning around the number on your Social Security statement, and that number feels official. It has your name on it. It comes from the government. It looks like something you can build around. So it is easy to treat it like a promise. The 2032 risk is that the number on the statement may not be the number that lands in your bank account if Congress waits too long. Once you put dollars on it, the problem gets a lot easier to see. If you expected $2,500 a month from Social Security and only 78% is payable, that check becomes about $1,950 a month. That is $550 missing every month. Over a year, that is $6,600. Over 10 years, that is $66,000 of expected retirement income that no longer shows up. If you and your spouse expected $4,500 a month combined, a 22% cut would be about $990 less per month, almost $1,000 a month. That is $11,880 a year. Over 10 years, it is $118,800. That is not tightening the belt. That is a serious hole in the retirement budget. And even that still does not tell the whole story, because the check amount is only one side of retirement. The other side is what everything costs. Think of your full expected Social Security benefit as $1 of retirement income. If the system can only pay 78 cents of that dollar, that is already a problem. And if everyday costs are about 3.6% higher than your household budget assumed, that check has to stretch even further. That is why the real-life squeeze can feel closer to 25%. That does not mean you will definitely face that exact number. This is a stress test, not a crystal ball, but it is a useful way to think about the problem, because bills do not care about official percentages. Bills care about dollars. A $2,500 expected check that falls to about $1,950 is already painful. If everyday costs are higher than your budget assumed, that $1,950 may feel closer to about $1,880 compared with what the full expected check was supposed to cover. That is groceries, insurance, utilities, prescriptions, or the part of your budget you thought Social Security would handle. This is why the only 22% framing can be misleading. A $550 or $990 monthly income gap is not only anything. That is a second grocery budget. That is a car payment without the car. That is the kind of gap that can turn a comfortable retirement into a much tighter one. And a lot of retirement plans are built with very little room for that kind of surprise. Your plan may work if Social Security shows up as expected, the pension pays, the portfolio behaves, healthcare costs stay reasonable, the roof does not leak, and the car does not choose the worst possible month to need repairs. But retirement is rarely that clean. A plan that only works if nothing breaks is not much of a plan. So the useful exercise is not to panic about 2032. It is to take the Social Security benefit you expected, test what happens if the check covers about 25% less, and see what gets strained first. If you are already retired, this news does not mean you should panic. It does mean you should know how dependent your monthly life is on Social Security. If that check covered 25% less than you expected, what would change first? If nothing changes, good. You have margin. If the answer is unclear, that is the homework. If the answer is groceries on a credit card, that needs attention now, not panic. Attention. If you are retiring around 2032, this matters even more. You are close enough that some big changes may still be possible, but not so far away that the deadline feels imaginary. This is the moment to run the stress test now, not in 2031 after Congress spends 6 months arguing on television. And if you are still 10 or more years away from retirement, the takeaway is different. You have more time. A few more years of higher savings, lower debt, consistent investing, and smaller fixed expenses can do a lot. This should feel less like doom and more like an input you can plan around. The hard part is that when you hear this kind of news, one reaction feels obvious. Should I claim Social Security early before the cut happens? That reaction makes sense emotionally. If you think money might be smaller later, of course you want to grab it now. But fear can create bad math. Claiming Social Security early will permanently reduce your monthly benefit compared with waiting until full retirement age or when you hit 70. And if future cuts are percentage-based, a smaller check can still get cut. Claiming early does not magically protect you from the funding problem. It may just lock in a smaller starting number. Claiming early can absolutely make sense in some situations. Health, life expectancy, cash flow, spousal benefits, survivor benefits, and taxes all matter. Whether you are still working also matters. All these matter a lot. A scary headline is not enough reason to change when you claim Social Security. That is not a claiming strategy. That is a panic reaction. Fear is useful when you need to react fast. Retirement claiming is not one of those moments. Before changing a claiming decision, put the lower check version of retirement on paper. And for this video, do not only test the 22% version. Test what happens if the check covers closer to 25% less. Start with your actual Social Security estimate, not a guess, not what a neighbor said, and not some number from an article. It has to be your estimate. If your estimate is $3,000 a month, 78% is $2,340. That means the check itself is $660 lower than expected. Then add the simple household stress test. If everyday costs are about 3.6% higher than your budget assumed, that smaller check has to stretch across higher bills. So instead of planning around a $660 gap, the more practical stress test is closer to, can my retirement absorb about $740 of lost spending power? Over a year, that is about $8,880. That is the money you have to find somewhere. It might come from savings, working longer, cutting back, downsizing, putting off the new car, or having a hard conversation with family about what your retirement budget can actually support. That last one is where things get dangerous because a Social Security cut by itself is one problem. A Social Security cut on top of higher prices and fixed expenses is a much bigger problem. This is the fixed cost trap. A benefit cut is painful when your budget has room to move. It is dangerous when your budget is already locked in with a mortgage, car payments, credit cards, personal loans, HELOCs, insurance premiums, property taxes, HOA fees, adult child support, and subscriptions you barely use but keep paying for anyway. If too much of your monthly life is already spoken for, a smaller Social Security check does not just mean fewer dinners out. It can make the whole plan shaky. That is why this matters so much if you are close to retirement but still have a paycheck covering everything. A paycheck can hide a lot. Social Security cannot. A paycheck can absorb sloppy spending, car upgrades, family emergencies, and a house that costs too much. A retirement check is less forgiving. The bills do not retire just because you do. Imagine you are short about $1,000 a month before inflation. Once everyday costs are higher than your budget assumed, it can feel even tighter. At first, you might do the obvious things: travel less, eat out less, delay the new car, or cancel a few subscriptions. That helps, but it usually does not replace a missing $1,000 a month, and it definitely does not replace it when groceries, insurance, utilities, and medical costs keep rising. Then the pressure moves. The missing money is no longer coming from vacation money. It is coming from portfolio withdrawals. That is where a benefit cut creates a second cost. If Social Security covers less of your monthly budget, your portfolio has to cover more. That can mean larger withdrawals. Larger withdrawals can mean higher tax bills. Higher tax bills can mean less spendable income. And if those larger withdrawals happen during a bad market, the portfolio is under pressure at the worst time. A smaller Social Security check does not stay in one box. It pushes on the rest of the plan. Your IRA has to work harder. Your cash reserve drains faster. Your house may be harder to maintain. A surviving spouse may be more exposed. And the whole retirement becomes more dependent on things going right. None of this means you are definitely getting cut in 2032. Congress may still act before then. That is important to say clearly. When Social Security gets close to a funding deadline, the political pressure gets real fast. Lawmakers have a few levers they can pull. They can bring more money into the system, change how benefits are calculated, adjust the taxable wage cap, phase in changes over time, or protect current retirees differently from future retirees. The point is not to predict which one they will choose. The point is that nobody knows yet. The trust fund projection is a warning light. It does not mean the car is dead, but it is not something to ignore either. If a warning light comes on in your car, you do not sell the car on the spot, but you also do not cover the light with tape and keep driving. You check the system. That is what this is, a retirement warning light. The right response is preparation. Start with the income gap, not the claiming decision. First, check your projected benefit at the claiming ages you are considering: age 62, full retirement age, and age 70. Not because one age is automatically right, but because each age gives you a different monthly check to build around. Second, test a smaller check. Use 78% as the benefit stress test, then run a spending power version closer to 75%. If your projected benefit is $2,800, 78% is about $2,184. If everyday costs are about 3.6% higher than your budget assumed, the practical stress test version is closer to $2,110. That does not mean your benefit will definitely be cut that much. It means you are putting your retirement through a controlled fire drill instead of waiting for a real one. Third, figure out what the shortfall would be each month. Don't leave it as some vague worry. If your gap is $400, write down $400. If it is $700, write down $700. If it is $1,100, write down $1,100. Once you know the number, you can start making decisions instead of just reacting to a headline. Fourth, look hard at fixed costs. A 22% benefit cut is much less dangerous if your monthly obligations are low. A 25% squeeze is much more dangerous if retirement already has 3 anchors tied to it: high-interest debt, a car payment that follows you into retirement, and a mortgage that only works while both spouses are still working. This is not about living like you are being punished. It is about lowering the amount of money your retirement has to produce every single month. You are not just cutting expenses. You are lowering pressure on the whole plan. Fifth, give yourself more backup options. Maybe that means keeping more cash available. Maybe it means creating more portfolio income. It could also mean working part-time for a few years, delaying retirement a little, downsizing later, or being more careful about which accounts you withdraw from first. Your move may look different from someone else's. The common goal is the same. Social Security should not be the only pillar holding up the porch. If one pillar shifts, you do not want the whole house leaning. Then, after you know the gap, revisit claiming strategy calmly. Claiming Social Security is not just about grabbing money early. It is about monthly income, longevity, spouse protection, taxes, work income, and how much pressure your savings has to carry. A bigger delayed benefit could still matter, even if future benefits are reduced. A smaller early benefit could still be the right move in some cases. But the decision should come from your household math, not from a headline. Headlines are written to make you react. Retirement plans are built to make you think. Those are not the same thing. So when you hear Social Security insolvency, do not stop at the headline. Put 4 numbers on paper: your scheduled benefit, 78% of that benefit, the rough version if everyday costs are about 3.6% higher than your budget assumed, and the fixed costs that would become hardest to carry if that gap became real. That gives you the real stress test. Social Security is very likely to continue in some form. Payroll taxes would still come in. Millions of Americans would still depend on the program. The practical problem is whether your monthly life still works if Social Security pays less than the number on your statement and does not go as far as you expected. Imagine yourself at your kitchen table in 2032. You expected $2,500 a month. The system can only pay about $1,950. Then everyday costs are higher than your budget assumed, so that check may feel closer to about $1,880 compared with the original expectation. That missing spending power has to come from somewhere. It might come from savings, part-time work, cutting expenses, delaying retirement, downsizing, putting off the new car, or setting clearer limits with family about what your retirement budget can handle. None of those are easy, but they are easier to consider before retirement than after the check is already smaller. That is the work before 2032. Find the weak spot while there is still time to fix it. Do not let the headline scare you into a rushed decision. Use it as a stress test. Run the lower check, lower spending power version of your retirement before you are forced to live it later. A smaller Social Security check is not a political headline once it hits your bank account. It is a monthly gap. And if everyday costs are higher than your budget assumed, it is an even bigger squeeze. That is something worth thinking about if you want your retirement to really feel like a real retirement. If you want retirement breakdowns that help you spot the money problems early, make better decisions, and feel less blindsided by the headlines, subscribe to Benji Knows Money. The goal is simple: understand the numbers before they turn into retirement surprises. Join us and subscribe now.